Most people compare renting and buying a home using a single number, the monthly payment. They look at a rent payment of $2,000 per month and compare it to a mortgage payment of $2,000 per month. If the numbers are similar, they often conclude that buying must be the better deal because at least some of the mortgage payment goes toward building equity. On the surface, that logic sounds perfectly reasonable. In fact, it sounds so reasonable that millions of people make one of the biggest financial decisions of their lives based on that comparison alone. The problem is that a mortgage payment is not the true cost of homeownership. It is only one piece of a much larger financial picture. Focusing exclusively on the mortgage is like looking at the sticker price of a car while ignoring fuel, maintenance, insurance, registration, and repairs. The sticker price matters, but it does not tell the whole story. Homeownership works the same way. The mortgage payment is simply the most visible expense, which is why so many people mistakenly treat it as the only expense that matters. Imagine two homes sitting side by side in the same neighborhood. One is occupied by a renter and the other by a homeowner. From the outside, they look identical. They enjoy the same streets, the same schools, the same local amenities, and the same quality of life. Yet their financial experiences can be dramatically different because the homeowner is responsible for a long list of expenses that never appear in a basic mortgage calculation. One of the first hidden costs is property taxes. Every year, homeowners pay taxes based on the value of their property. In some areas, these taxes are relatively modest. In others, they can be surprisingly high. What makes property taxes especially important is that they never disappear. Even after the mortgage is fully paid off, property taxes continue. Many people dream of the day they own their home outright, imagining that their housing costs will drop to almost nothing. Then they realize they still owe thousands of dollars each year just to keep the property. Another major expense is homeowners insurance. Mortgage lenders typically require insurance coverage, and for good reason. Homes are valuable assets that face risks from fire, storms, theft, and countless other unexpected events. Insurance protects against those risks, but that protection comes at a cost. While insurance premiums may not seem overwhelming in isolation, they become significant when combined with every other expense attached to ownership. Maintenance is another cost that homeowners consistently underestimate. A home is a physical structure, and every physical structure slowly deteriorates over time. Paint fades, roofs age, plumbing systems wear out, electrical components fail, driveways crack, windows lose efficiency, carpets become worn, water heaters eventually stop working. Even a well-maintained property requires continuous investment just to preserve its condition. Many first-time buyers assume maintenance expenses will be occasional and manageable. Then reality arrives. One year it is a leaking roof. The next year it is a broken furnace. After that, it might be foundation work, appliance replacement, or plumbing repairs. These costs often appear without warning and demand immediate attention. A renter can usually call a landlord when something breaks. A homeowner becomes the landlord. Financial experts often estimate that homeowners should expect to spend around 1% of their home's value every year on maintenance and repairs. For a $500,000 home, that translates to approximately $5,000 annually. Some years may be lower. Other years may be dramatically higher. The key point is that maintenance is not optional. Ignoring it simply allows problems to grow until they become even more expensive. Then there are homeowner association fees, commonly known as HOA fees. Not every property has them, but many do. These fees can range from relatively small monthly charges to amounts that rival car payments. Homeowners often focus intensely on securing a favorable mortgage rate while overlooking recurring HOA costs that may continue increasing over time. Utility expenses can also shift significantly when moving from renting to owning. Some renters live in properties where certain utilities are included in the rent. Homeowners, however, are generally responsible for everything: water, sewer, trash collection, landscaping, pest control, and various maintenance services can all add to the monthly burden. One of the most overlooked costs of ownership is the opportunity cost of the down payment. When someone purchases a home, they often invest a substantial amount of money up front. A 20% down payment on a $500,000 property equals $100,000. That money is no longer available for other investments. This creates an important financial question. What could that $100,000 have earned elsewhere? If invested in diversified assets, it might generate significant returns over time. By allocating the money toward a home purchase, the buyer gives up those potential gains. Opportunity cost is not an expense that appears on a monthly statement, which is why many people ignore it. Yet it remains one of the most important factors in any financial decision. Transaction costs create another layer of expense that buyers frequently underestimate. Purchasing a home involves closing costs, legal fees, inspections, appraisals, loan origination charges, and numerous administrative expenses. Selling a home introduces even more costs. Real estate commissions alone can consume a substantial percentage of the property's value. Add staging expenses, moving costs, repairs requested by buyers, and various closing fees, and the total can become surprisingly large. These transaction costs matter because they reduce the homeowner's actual return on investment. A property may increase in value over time, but part of that appreciation can be offset by the costs required to buy and sell it. Many homeowners focus exclusively on rising home prices while forgetting the expenses attached to every transaction. Interest payments represent another reality that is often misunderstood. While a mortgage payment includes principal that builds equity, it also includes interest paid to the lender. During the early years of many mortgages, a substantial portion of each payment goes toward interest rather than ownership. Buyers are often surprised when they discover how slowly principal balances decline in the beginning. This does not mean buying a home is a bad decision. It simply means the financial calculation is more complex than most people realize. The mortgage payment alone tells only a fraction of the story. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, HOA fees, utilities, transaction costs, opportunity costs, and interest expenses all contribute to the true cost of ownership. When these expenses are added together, the monthly cost of owning a home often looks very different from the number that originally appeared on the mortgage application. What seemed like a straightforward comparison between rent and a mortgage becomes a much deeper analysis of total financial obligations. Understanding this distinction is essential because making an informed housing decision requires evaluating every cost attached to ownership rather than focusing exclusively on the payment that appears most obvious at first glance. Once you understand that a mortgage payment is not the true cost of homeownership, the next question becomes obvious. If the mortgage payment doesn't tell us whether buying or renting is the better financial choice, then what does? This is where the 8.71% rule becomes incredibly useful because it provides a framework for comparing the cost of owning a home with the cost of renting in a way that is both simple and surprisingly effective. Most housing decisions are driven by emotion. People fall in love with a property, imagine their future in it, and then search for financial reasons to justify the purchase. The numbers often become secondary. The problem with this approach is that housing is usually the largest financial commitment most people will ever make. Decisions of that size deserve more than emotional reasoning. They deserve a method that looks at the complete financial picture. The 8.71% rule attempts to do exactly that. At its core, the rule suggests that homeowners should estimate the annual cost of owning a property as a percentage of the home's value. Instead of focusing solely on monthly mortgage payments, it combines multiple ownership expenses into one figure. This creates a more realistic comparison between owning and renting. Imagine a home worth $500,000. Many buyers immediately begin calculating monthly mortgage payments based on interest rates, down payments, and loan terms. While those calculations are important, they often ignore several significant expenses that accompany ownership. The 8.71% rule accounts for these costs by viewing them as percentages of the home's value. The largest component is usually the opportunity cost of the money invested in the home. When someone buys a property, they tie up capital that could have been invested elsewhere. Whether it's the down payment or equity accumulated over time, that money has an alternative use. If invested in diversified assets, it might generate returns year after year. By placing it into a home, the owner sacrifices those potential gains. Many people struggle with this concept because opportunity cost is invisible. There is no monthly bill labeled lost investment returns. Yet the cost is real. Every financial decision involves choosing one option over another, and every choice carries consequences. The money committed to a home cannot simultaneously be invested in stocks, businesses, or other opportunities. Property taxes represent another important component. Governments assess taxes based on property values, and homeowners must pay them regardless of market conditions. Whether home prices rise or fall, property taxes remain a recurring obligation. In many locations, these taxes increase over time, adding another layer to the ownership equation. Maintenance costs also play a major role. Every homeowner eventually discovers that houses require constant attention. Roofs wear out, exterior paint deteriorates, plumbing systems age, heating and cooling equipment reaches the end of its lifespan. Landscaping requires upkeep. Even relatively new homes need repairs and preventive maintenance. Insurance contributes another percentage to the total ownership cost. While insurance protects homeowners from major financial losses, it is still an ongoing expense that renters often avoid directly. Insurance premiums can fluctuate based on location, weather risks, property values, and market conditions. The rule also considers transaction costs. Buying and selling real estate is expensive. Closing costs, legal fees, inspections, loan charges, commissions, and moving expenses all reduce the financial benefits of ownership. Because these costs occur over the life of ownership, they can be annualized and incorporated into the calculation. When all these factors are combined, the total often approaches approximately 8.71% of the home's value each year. The exact number may vary depending on local conditions, tax rates, maintenance needs, and investment assumptions, but the principle remains the same. Ownership carries costs that extend far beyond the mortgage payment. Let's look at what this means in practical terms. Suppose a home is valued at $500,000. Applying the 8.71% rule results in an estimated annual ownership cost of $43,550. Dividing that by 12 months produces a monthly ownership cost of approximately $3,629. This number often surprises people because it is significantly higher than what they expected. Many buyers compare a mortgage payment of perhaps $2,500 per month against rent of $2,500 per month and conclude that buying must be superior. The 8.71% rule reveals that the actual cost of ownership may be much closer to $3,629 per month once all factors are considered. Now the comparison becomes more meaningful. If an equivalent property can be rented for $2,500 per month, the renter may save over $1,100 each month compared with the true cost of ownership. That difference creates opportunities. It can be invested, saved, or used to pursue other financial goals. This is where the rule changes the conversation. Instead of asking whether rent is higher or lower than the mortgage payment, people begin comparing rent to the full cost of ownership. The focus shifts from a narrow calculation to a comprehensive financial analysis. The beauty of the 8.71% rule lies in its simplicity. Real estate decisions involve countless variables. Interest rates change, property values fluctuate, tax laws evolve, maintenance expenses vary. Future market performance remains uncertain. Despite all this complexity, the rule offers a practical shortcut that captures many of the most important considerations. Of course, the rule is not intended to be perfect. No single formula can predict every housing outcome. Real estate markets differ dramatically from one region to another. Some cities have exceptionally high rents relative to home prices. Others have unusually low rents. Local taxes, insurance costs, and maintenance requirements can vary significantly. The purpose of the rule is not precision down to the last dollar, its purpose is perspective. Many people never account for hidden ownership costs at all. As a result, they make comparisons that are incomplete from the beginning. The 8.71% rule encourages a more balanced evaluation by recognizing that ownership involves multiple expenses beyond the mortgage. It also helps remove some of the emotional bias that often surrounds housing decisions. Home ownership is deeply embedded in cultural narratives about success, stability, and wealth. People are frequently told that buying a home is always the smartest financial move. While ownership can absolutely be beneficial, broad statements rarely capture individual circumstances. Financial decisions work best when they are grounded in numbers rather than assumptions. The rule provides a framework for testing common beliefs against economic reality. It allows prospective buyers and renters to evaluate their options using consistent criteria. Perhaps most importantly, the rule encourages people to think about housing as one component of a larger financial plan rather than an isolated decision. A home affects investment opportunities, cash flow, savings rates, flexibility, and long-term wealth accumulation. Looking at ownership costs as a percentage of value creates a clearer understanding of those trade-offs. Once people begin evaluating housing choices through this lens, they often discover that the answer is not as obvious as they originally believed. In some situations, buying may clearly outperform renting. In others, renting may offer compelling financial advantages. The strength of the 8.71% rule is that it provides a structured way to make that comparison using realistic assumptions rather than relying on conventional wisdom alone. For many people, the idea that renting could ever be financially superior to buying feels completely wrong. They have spent years hearing the same message repeated over and over again. Buy a home as soon as possible. Stop throwing money away on rent. Build equity instead of helping a landlord get rich. These statements sound convincing because they contain a degree of truth. Homeownership can be a powerful wealth-building tool. The problem arises when people assume it is the only path to wealth. The reality is that wealth is not created simply by owning a house. Wealth is created when assets grow faster than liabilities and when money is allocated efficiently over long periods of time. A house can certainly contribute to that process, but so can many other investments. Once people understand this distinction, they begin to see why renting is not necessarily a financial disadvantage and in some situations can actually become the better option. The key phrase is investing the difference. When someone rents a property for less than the true cost of owning an equivalent home, they create a gap between those two expenses. That gap represents potential investment capital. If the renter consistently invests those savings into productive assets, the long-term results can be surprisingly powerful. Consider two individuals with identical incomes. One buys a home and commits a large down payment along with ongoing ownership costs. The other rents a similar property and invests every dollar saved from the lower housing expense. At first, the homeowner may appear to be making more financial progress because each mortgage payment gradually builds equity. The renter, on the other hand, appears to be paying for something they will never own. This perception often causes people to stop the analysis too early. The important question is not whether the renter owns the property. The important question is what happens to the money that remains available because they chose to rent. If that money is invested consistently into diversified assets such as broad market index funds, businesses, retirement accounts, or other productive investments, it begins generating returns. Those returns generate additional returns. Over time, the process accelerates through the power of compounding. Compounding is one of the most remarkable forces in finance because it rewards patience. Money earns returns, and those returns begin earning returns of their own. Given enough time, relatively modest contributions can grow into substantial amounts. The effect may seem slow during the early years, but it becomes increasingly powerful as decades pass. Imagine someone investing $1,000 every month that would otherwise have been absorbed by higher ownership costs. During the first year, the progress may seem insignificant. After several years, the account begins to grow more noticeably. After a decade or two, the accumulated investments can reach levels that surprise even disciplined savers. Many people underestimate how large these balances can become because they focus entirely on real estate appreciation. They see home prices rising and conclude that ownership is automatically creating wealth. What they often fail to calculate is the growth that could have occurred if excess funds had been invested elsewhere. This is particularly important in markets where housing prices have risen dramatically relative to rents. In some cities, purchasing a home requires a massive financial commitment compared with renting an equivalent property. Buyers may need large down payments, high monthly payments, substantial maintenance budgets, and significant transaction costs. Renters in those markets sometimes enjoy a considerable financial advantage if they invest their savings wisely. Flexibility is another benefit that renters often overlook. Home ownership creates stability, but it can also reduce financial mobility. Selling a property takes time. Transaction costs can be substantial. Market conditions may not always be favorable. If a homeowner receives a job opportunity in another city, relocating can become a complicated and expensive process. Renters generally enjoy more flexibility. They can adapt to changing circumstances more easily. Career opportunities, business ventures, educational pursuits, and lifestyle changes may be easier to pursue when housing obligations are less restrictive. Flexibility itself has economic value. A person who can relocate quickly for a higher-paying job may significantly increase their lifetime earnings. An entrepreneur who avoids tying large amounts of capital into real estate may have more resources available to start or expand a business. Someone who maintains greater liquidity may be better positioned to take advantage of investment opportunities when they arise. Liquidity represents another major advantage. A substantial portion of a homeowner's net worth is often concentrated in a single asset. While that asset may appreciate over time, accessing its value can be difficult. Home equity is not as liquid as cash or investment accounts. Turning equity into spendable money usually requires borrowing, refinancing, or selling the property. Renters who invest consistently may build portfolios that are easier to access and manage. Their wealth remains diversified across multiple assets rather than concentrated in one location. Diversification reduces dependence on the performance of a single market and can improve overall financial resilience. Of course, renting only works as a wealth-building strategy when the savings are actually invested. This is where many people go wrong. A renter who spends every dollar saved on lifestyle upgrades is unlikely to outperform a disciplined homeowner. Lower housing costs alone do not create wealth. What matters is what happens to the difference. If those savings disappear into expensive cars, luxury purchases, frequent dining out, or unnecessary subscriptions, the financial advantage of renting largely vanishes. The strategy depends on discipline. Every month, the savings generated by renting must be directed toward productive investments. The process should be automatic and consistent. The renter must essentially treat investing as a mandatory expense rather than an optional activity. Without this commitment, renting becomes consumption rather than wealth creation. Another misconception is that homeowners always earn extraordinary returns through appreciation. Property values can certainly increase over time, but appreciation is not guaranteed. Real estate markets experience periods of growth, stagnation, and decline. Some regions perform exceptionally well. Others may struggle for years. Future outcomes are never certain. Homeowners also face concentration risk because so much of their wealth depends on one property and one geographic location. If local economic conditions weaken, property values may suffer. A diversified investment portfolio spreads risk across many companies, industries, and sectors rather than relying on a single asset. This does not mean renting is always superior. There are many situations where buying makes excellent financial sense. A buyer planning to remain in a property for a long time may benefit from appreciation, stable housing costs, and gradual equity accumulation. Homeownership also provides intangible benefits such as control over the living environment, emotional satisfaction, and a sense of permanence. The point is not that renting is better than buying. The point is that renting can be better than buying under specific circumstances, especially when the cost difference is significant and the renter invests consistently. The most successful wealth builders often avoid thinking in absolutes. They do not assume that one strategy works in every situation. Instead, they evaluate trade-offs, compare alternatives, and make decisions based on numbers rather than assumptions. When viewed through this perspective, the housing decision becomes less about ownership and more about capital allocation. Every dollar committed to a home is a dollar that cannot be invested elsewhere. Every dollar saved through renting creates an opportunity for future growth. The outcome depends not only on housing costs, but also on investment returns, market performance, time horizons, personal discipline, and financial priorities. Once people recognize that wealth can be built through multiple paths, they stop viewing renting as merely a temporary stage before homeownership. They begin viewing it as a legitimate financial strategy that, when executed correctly, has the potential to generate substantial long-term wealth through disciplined investing, flexibility, diversification, liquidity, and the relentless mathematical force of compound growth.